A Sort of Fairytale was the debut single from this album.
Featuring a very interesting music video starring
Tori Amos as a leg.
Yeah, and the beautiful big-nosed Adrian Brody as
a hand.
As a hand.
A leg in search of a hand.
It's actually a really beautiful film clip. If you haven't watched it, and even if you have, just give it another watch. I watched it again recently and was like, oof, like it's very powerful.
When it came out, I was here for it. Like, I was so on board with that music video.
When we were in San Diego, there was a very little girl named Matilda who'd come to the meet and greet, which unfortunately didn't get to happen, so she wouldn't have shown Tori the drawings that she'd done, but she'd drawn Tori as a foot. She said she had two drawings, one was Tori as a foot and the other one was just this random, she said, I call this one Random Girl, it's just a drawing of a random girl. I was like, oh, I'm so ready for the Random Girl improv.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Which didn't happen.
It also reminds me of that self-portrait, in inverted commas, that Tori did years and years and years ago. That was basically, it was in crayon. It was basically some red scratchings for hair, then a line in the shape of a kind of L with a tiny foot on it, and then a big pink shoe. So like, that was all. There is to Tori, apparently. She is red hair and a shoe.
And a big pink shoe. Well, we are called the Ears with Feet for a reason.
We're just here to listen and
walk
to shows. So here we are. Scarlett's walking. Michael's walking. There's so much walking.
Oh,
At
God.
Disney World, I did 28,000 steps and had chafing like nobody's business.
Oh, yeah. Well, just be grateful you didn't have to sprint across Epcot to meet Belle.
Well, choices.
Hey! No, I was compelled to go.
I support your choices.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted a photo of me with her where I don't have a beard. That's all I wanted. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Hi, I'm Michael Earp.
And I'm Bailey Turner.
Welcome to Michael's Walk.
The podcast.
Michael's Walk is a road trip, a search for something. Spoilers! It's myself, and it was inside all along.
If only it were that simple.
Driven by Tori Amos's album, Scarlett's Walk, I'm recreating the journey Scarlett took in its 20th anniversary year.
I'll also be there.
With the loving and patient,
always patient,
support of Bailey and Teague Lee, 3 trans queers set out across America.
That's 33 states in 55 days.
To connect with the songs, the land that inspired them, and the fans inspired by the songs. We'll talk music, travel, healing, and hope as we ask the questions: how do I heal from 15 years of coercive control and manipulation?
And what role does the music we listen to play in our own relationship narratives?
We've self-produced this podcast and trip.
You can support us via GoFundMe.
For the full story, head to michaelerp.net.
A Sort of Fairytale is as we discovered while we were sort of planning the episode, is a very powerful song for both of us and has very intense significances. And it can be taken to mean many different things, as all Tori songs are open to interpretation, but this is really about that moment where you realise that the relationship that you've sort of placed all of your hope in and that you want the best for is not going to be a lifelong thing. And you kind of have to break that silver lining.
I was actually listening to it again this morning, and
now those are choices. That's a choice.
Look, when it comes to Scarlett, I will inflict it upon myself at every available opportunity. But that line, I knew it was a lifelong thing. It's still a lifelong thing.
Yeah, yes.
Here I am, 5 years on, it's still with me.
Well, it's always going to be part of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it was 15 years of my life. It doesn't go away because I'm not Rudy Rod in the Fifth Element.
This is an eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
Exactly. We cannot just erase those 25 minutes.
It's a great TED talk where a woman talks about when you go through trauma, like a loss of a partnership, and she's talking about grief and death. She's like, you don't move on from, you move on with. And that's what you got to do. You got to figure out how to make it a part of you that's healthy, and that doesn't get in the way of you continuing to live. But it doesn't mean that you forget, or that you don't remember, or that it's not as much a part of you as what you ate for breakfast. It's there.
But also, like, you can know that it's a lifelong thing and know that it will always be a part of you. But then the very next line is, I didn't know we could break our silver lining. And I guess it was that silver lining that was keeping me there. I was seeing the beautiful cage.
Yes, and the way the caged bird sings, darling.
Exactly.
Well, I remember I'm just suddenly reminded of a time when we were together where they were stood in your kitchen and we knew that we were going to be a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, it didn't matter whether we were going to be romantically connected or not, but we just valued and loved each other so much that we knew that it was something that was going to last, forever, and always grateful for how much work we put. And that, we worked to do that. We both worked to recover from the heartbreak of parting and work to keep our friendship alive. And I think there's a great deal to be said about the fact that we're putting our relationship very much under the test here. This is 2 months in each other's company, and at the end of this week, Teague will be gone. It's just going to be the two of us, and the work that we're doing to allow our friendship to the investment we're making in each other, because this trip will always be something we did together, and it will always matter to us for that reason. And
it will be a lifelong thing.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I got myself a tattoo on day 4, which that will be with me forever.
Which reminds me, I need to look up queer tattooists in New
do,
York.
yeah. You need to book that in. Yeah, a little bit of tour admin. Sorry, everybody. We do need to do that today.
Yes. A Sort of Fairytale is one of the longer trails of colour on the map. It stretches from LA, where we left Scarlett, and it goes up almost to San Francisco, but not quite. Comes back down through Palm Springs, Palm Desert, all the way out to Santa Fe and Teos in New Mexico. Is that how you pronounce it? And
someone will tell us if it's not.
Yeah. I love how willing people are to correct other people.
Yes. Joshua Blay will tell us. We love you, Joshua. We can't wait to see you.
And then back all the way up through San Francisco to Crescent City. That's where it changes to Wednesday. And so for us, our experience on this map is landing in San Francisco. Scarlett doesn't actually go to Yosemite, but it's in the vicinity, and it's a sort of natural reflection that we were looking for as well, so we're including it in our travels. And then our drive from LA down to Palm Springs, and then we parted ways, and Teague and Bailey went on to experience Arizona and New Mexico, Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and the lovely Ash Fork Inn.
If you could see the look on my face right now, everybody, there is a visual gag being done. I'm sure Ash Fork's lovely, just not for 2 trans people traveling without their third.
Yeah. Sad times.
They were. But anyway, let's start with Yosemite. Let's start with the happy beginnings.
Yosemite is just gobsmacking.
Gabsmocking.
Gabby.
Oh, that went left. It was like sets. It looked like it literally looked painted. It was beyond, absolutely beyond.
So much. And so we wanted to explore and take photos. Teague was very keen to see as much of it as we could. We were literally there for a night, so we didn't have all the time in the world. We had to be selective, and some of the things that we really wanted to see were just too far a drive or too far a hike. We would have done it if we had the time. We could spend like a couple of weeks there easy. But one of the places we did get to see was almost metaphorically called Mirror Lake, in that we trekked out to Mirror Lake and sat down to do some personal reflections, and I found that you know, looking at myself very closely in the middle of the wilderness, surrounded by such incredible beauty, was so humbling, and like really made me check the scale of what I'm trying to do, both in it is bigger than me, but also I am much smaller than the grand scheme of things. And so it was wonderful to get some perspective in that way. And while we were there, we had this little sort of pasture just past Mirror Lake to ourselves. There was no other hikers around. And so I asked if it would be fine for me to listen to a sort of fairy tale, because I didn't want to disrupt other people's experience of nature, but that was fine. So we put it on, just played it from my phone, and it was so surreal, because I swear to God the tempo was half of what I normally experience it as. It was as if she had re-recorded a real slow pared back version just for me to hear out in Yosemite, where all of the lyrics were just, I could hear them. I could hear every single lyric as if it was spoken for me. Just, it blew me away how different it sounded when I sat still, ready to listen. And it brought up all kinds of flashbacks for me. The song's very much about reassessing the relationship you thought you had, noticing where things are not quite the fairy tale that you had been telling yourself. So I always thought this was a love song. I only ever heard the parts of it that suited me, so much so that A Sort of Fairy Tale was my ex's ringtone for most of our relationship. In fact, for the entirety of our relationship, because it came out about 6 months after we got together, and then I just loved it so much that I set it as the ringtone. But now I hear more of it, and when Tori sings, like the chorus opens with "I'm so sad," like a good book, I can't put this day back. And I always told myself that sadness was the sadness in needing to put down a good book, whereas now I see it as acknowledging that you're sad in the situation, but not wanting to put the book back because the book is the fairy tale. There's this other line in it where she sings, "Where the honey spread itself so thin that for me to take your word, for me to break your bread, I had to steal it." I have just mixed up those lyrics. For me to break your bread, for me to take your word, I had to steal it. And I realized that that's exactly how our relationship played out. The good times were fewer and fewer. We got so good at just going through the motions that I forgot to notice that we hadn't had a really good patch for years. It got to the point where it was years and years, and I just kept on saying we just need to get through this, and then it will be good. If we just get through this, it will get better. Just this momentum, keeping up the momentum. But then beyond that, I never knew what the truth of the situation was in that relationship either. I was stealing the truth from him. I was going into his phone, checking his search histories, reading his messages, searching through emails, because I couldn't trust anything he was saying to me. So the only way I had to find out where I stood was to literally steal it. And that always made me feel like shit. Like I never wanted to be that person, but I kind of felt like the only way I could feel sure of what was going on, and even if it was bad, like I would rather know that things were not good than be unaware of them and think that everything is fine. which is a strange thing to say considering how heavily I held on to the picturesque image of our relationship.
We can do a pretty good job of deceiving ourselves in those kind of scenarios.
Yeah. So much so when Tori sings, the girl had come undone, like I had come undone, but I downplayed it with a bet about us. Like I kept on downplaying what I was going through because I wanted to bet on what the future could hold.
Yeah, literally.
I didn't know what the odds were, but I just kept on forking over my money.
Literally,
waiting for the change that never came.
Well, at some point you folded.
That's true. Well, I went bankrupt.
Yeah, that's it. You can't. Yeah.
I had nothing left to give. But listening to that song in the middle of Yosemite was fascinating because when we got to the part where she sings, I rode alongside you then, just so naturally that voice turned to be Tori singing to me and saying, like, I was beside you through all of that. And it was like, you lost me, I was there by your side, I was trying to help you through it, and I have never left you, like Tori's never left me. I lost her in the review. And so it's so good to be reconnecting with her in such a big way.
So much that Footprints in the Sand, Lilith Fair edition or something. It was a really wonderful thing to listen to. Just kind of where we were kind of sat on this log, and you were at one end and I was at the other, and Teague was off taking photos, and it was just this really, really poignant moment to share.
Weeping heavily.
Yes, the power of that song, for me, it's actually the first song that I was ever given by someone. Someone put a friend of mine, Hendrika, put it on like a CD compilation that she gave me in high school. And I didn't really get it. I didn't listen to it because I just skipped it to listen to Buttons by Pussycat Dolls because that's where I was at that time. And it was really I look at it now as a very big missed opportunity, because if I'd managed to cotton on, I would have been with Tori a lot sooner. I didn't kind of come to know her until for another 3 or so years, just before Abnormally Attracted to Sin came out. I've always thought the song was very sweet, and I really liked what it was about, but it didn't really become a thing until I actually drove on the 101 in 2017 with Geordie Zickerfoos, and we were heading north back to LA after seeing Jewel in San Diego together, and we'd had this incredible week. I was in a very strange, heart space where I'd kind of thought I'd fallen for this person, and I thought that there was going to be kind of a relationship here, and then discovered that what we had was so much deeper than that and so much more special. And renegotiating those boundaries and being really honest with him about what I was feeling and what I was encountering emotionally in his company. A Sort of Fairytale has become very much about him because we listened to it on that drive, and that song accompanied those conversations about what friendship we discovered together. Yeah, and time spent in Fresno. So I'm really excited when we do get back to Fresno. It's like our last sort of American stop on the trip before we head home, effectively. So that song means a lot to me, and has meant more to me in recovering from my latest relationship, because it's very much that similar notion of like, I don't want to give it up, I don't want to let it go. It makes me so sad to think that I have to kind of move on from it, and what I read since, or what I write since, is going to impact that narrative very specifically, and understanding that people sometimes just go in different directions. But we talked about this when we were planning the episode, about the difference in power when, I often felt like I lost him, and that it was on me. And often I take, and I know you and I are very similar in this way, we take on a lot more responsibility than we deserve, or than is the reality, because that's a way of keeping control. Like, if I'm the one to blame, then it's all my fault, and I can handle that, but I can't account for someone else's mistakes. But when we were listening to this live, she played it, I think it was first night when we were in front row, and first night of LA, and when she sang those words, no, you lost me. It's going, no, that's where I need to step into now. Like, you lost me. There were choices that you made, and there were things that you weren't ready for that I was, and work that you couldn't do that I was willing to. In the way that undoing happened, you lost me. And it's a very, very powerful switch of perspective that kind of happened there.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what else I could have done in my situation. I had given my all and saw no changes. In fact, I saw deterioration.
Yeah.
And so, it is reaffirming to just position it in that way.
And I think even if there was something more we could have done in our respective situations, it's irrelevant. Because we could only be who we were at the time. We only had the information and the situation that we had. It's all because of how hard we've worked since those relationships to grow and to change and to discover and evolve strength. Of course, what we have now would have been great tools for back then, but we wouldn't have developed them if that hadn't happened, right?
Yeah.
So it's irrelevant. A sort of fairy tale for me reminds me of this great moment in a film called Boys on the Side, which is a sort of 90s queer femme film. And there's a character in it who is, she is dying of HIV. Spoiler alert. It's a great film. Please watch it. It's stunning. Whoopi Goldberg, Drew Barrymore, and Mary Louise Masterson, I think. No, not that one. The other one. Mary Parker something.
Isn't it? Oh, Mary Parker Bowles. No.
Not Mary Parker Bowles! Mary Parker Bowles! Mary Louise Parker. And she's talking about how you don't know that the last time is the last time. And it really is that. It's that, you have
good day.
Yeah, the last good day. You don't know it's the last good day. You always believe you'll have more. And then suddenly you look back over, years in the distance, you go, wow, that was the last good day we had, and I had no idea. And if I'd known that was going to be the last good day we had, would I have, and it's a very kind of powerful feeling when you do look back and you go, gosh, it was like that was the last time we would make love, or that was the last time that you would tell me you loved me. It was the last kiss goodnight we would have. That stuff is so precious because in those moments you were so innocent because you believed there would be more. You were sure that there would be another to come, and then there aren't, and suddenly what you have to hold on to is that, whatever that was and whatever context it was in. So a sort of fairy tale really kind of sonically simulates that sensation of like, shit, that was our last time as lovers.
Yeah. So when we were in
Los Angeles, the city of angels.
Yes.
Well, we actually met Kenny in San Francisco.
Yeah,
in Oakland.
That's the word I was trying to get out. San Francisco. When we were in San Francisco, we met Kenny, delightful Kenny Dulac, who was so lovely and supportive of this project and the trip. And then when we got to LA, he met up with us to be interviewed about his experiences for the book and also for the podcast. And so here's a little snippet of the chat we had with Kenny. How are ya?
Doing really well. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being a part of it. Of
course.
It's nice that people have reached out and want to be a part of it. So,
Absolutely. I think it's so incredible what you're doing, writing about trauma and doing this trip. It's just amazing. Out of this world.
Thank you. It seems like a lot, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
Discovering all sorts of things as we go.
Totally. Gotta unpack. It's a lifelong journey, right?
Absolutely. Let's jump in with your favorite Tory song, your top signature song. Let's just get right into it.
No, that's a good one. It's hard for me to say a signature song because I feel like different songs speak to me in different moments at different times, but the one that I'm always going back to is Bliss. And it's funny because I never thought of it as like a daddy issue song when I first heard it, but I don't know. I've never had a weird relationship with my dad, so I've never associated it with that. You know what I mean? So it's always felt like the bliss of another kind could be any sort of relationship. Like it didn't necessarily have to be a father-child sort of thing. And Drive All Night. For whatever reason, Drive All Night is just like such a goofy song, but the lyrics are really great. And lately, like literally on this trip, Suede has been creeping up a little bit. I think just there's something about Suede that kind of speaks to my soul a little bit. I think the swallowing of that lyric.
Whole star intact.
Yes, that.
Yeah, I've always loved Suede. For me personally, it's been that moment, the bridge. Tori's so good at bridges.
Yeah.
The little sister part. Oof. I don't know if I've felt like the little sister or I've wanted a little sister or...
Do you have any siblings?
I have 4 brothers.
Okay.
So, so maybe I was the little sister then because, not quite male in the traditional sense of things. Yeah, but this isn't about me. This is about you. What's been your overall experience with your connection to Tori's music?
Oh, good question. I started listening to Tori in like 2006, and I was 16. I was gay, but didn't know I was gay, really. Like, I had an idea, but didn't really know, that kind of that shtick. And then, I was really into Bjork, got into Tori kind of by proxy through the Bjork fans. Tori's music just, like, immediately jumped off the page, right? I started with Tales of a Librarian, so I got a really nice eclectic mix of her career. I just remember Precious Things and then Angels, like, just the way they sort of hit I'd never heard lyrics like that before. I'd never heard a person bare their soul like that before. But I was 16, I was very immature, I didn't know who I was, so I didn't connect to it like I do now. I'm 32 now, I'm double the age, so I've had a lot of time to grow up. I think the thing I like to associate with Tori lyrics is empowerment and healing and sort of finding the answers to questions that you don't really know how to answer sometimes. You might be in a situation where, what do? I don't know what to do, and literally a new single will come out, and it'll have a message, and you're like, whoa, that's bizarre. That's weird timing. I'm gonna follow that. She's the bee's knees. Open-endedness of her lyrics just let you sort of apply it in a way that makes sense to you as well. And I love that when people ask her what a song means, it's usually like, what does it mean to you? That's her response. It's like, if it means something to you, that's what it means.
Just generally, have you turned to Tori's music for healing? Do you have any examples of how Tori's music can be healing?
Yeah. When I was, I think, 17... fell in love, and with this boy. He was at a different high school than me, but I met him at like a Rainbow Youth like association thing. Apparently he was a slut, which is fine. I didn't really care at the time because I was so infatuated with him, but I became like a weird prude afterwards, and that's probably partially because of him. So we like had to hook up, and I was like me losing my virginity. Yeah. And I was wearing a Marilyn Manson t-shirt. How terrible, right? And it lasted 5 minutes, and I didn't even get off, and he asked me to take him to his friend's house afterwards, like after he finished, right? So it was like, wow, okay, I guess. And I was still so like head over heels for this guy, even though I knew he treated me like shit. And eventually he basically just kind of ghosted me eventually. So it was like power was all in his hands this whole time. I was just like a sucker. He actually had a boyfriend when he started talking to me. So he was like, it was just like a red flags all around. I don't know why I didn't pick up on that, but it is what it is. A Sort of Fairytale was really the song that like helped me get through that, because it was like, yes, this was something that was meaningful in the moment, but passes you by, And I thought in the moment that song was really about everlasting love, right? But then I sort of analyze the lyrics a little deeper, and it sort of comes to you at that point. My thing with Tori lyrics is like, I don't read the booklets really. I just kind of listen, and I end up having a lot of lyrics wrong until I go and I read the lyrics. It's very
I'm exactly the same. Even on this trip, I've been like, I better Google those lyrics, because if I'm going to talk about them on a podcast, they better be right, not my random hearing of them.
Yeah.
Do you rely on any Tori songs to sort of help you maintain healthy relationships? Or...
Oh, that's a really good question. It's a curveball. I think a lot of her later stuff you know, where she's dealt with the trauma already. And it's sort of like with her.
Though?
I
I
mean,
mean, 29 years.
to some
Says
extent.
it's still there.
I mean, okay, so maybe more of like her marriage and her
Right,
like
yeah.
relationship trauma, like with Mark. So you know, we have the songs where she's like pissed at him and stuff, but like at the end of the song, it's like they still love each other despite their flaws. Like I love Chocolate Song. I think it's so sweet. It's like such a cool way to sort of, or is it a hot way to look at like at that relationship dynamic where it's like. And Wings. I think Wings is such a, like, it's such a hated song, right? Because she sings in that baby voice, but, like, the lyrics are really kind of sweet if you really look at them. You've got to allow your people a space to process, and sometimes that means crying. When my partner and I fight, I just want to cry. I hate being in that situation, and, like, sometimes breaking down is really the best thing you can do because it lets you kind of cathartically release everything. And then you can sort of recollect and say what you actually mean to say. At least with me, I have like verbal diarrhea, so I have to like process it first. Otherwise, I'm like, oh my God.
But I guess breaking down and crying also, like in a big way, shows your partner how vulnerable you are and how much this experience is churning you up. So
Exactly. I've always told him, you know, if you do something and it impacts me, it's because I care about you. Like, it's if somebody else, if the neighbor across the street cheats on his wife, I don't give a shit. But if you cheat on me, I'm going to be upset. Like, there's impact, right? It's like, that's why we're partners and not roommates. So there's that thing where it's like, even though we're poly, even though we're open, we're still partners. Keep that in mind. Like, it's not like we're just roommates now. And sometimes that's my own insecurity coming into the foray, but you know, I think it's a healthy reminder regardless. That's the whole point. You got to be communicative about how you're feeling. Even if it's irrational, even if it's stupid, just say how you're feeling so that someone can at least go, okay, I hear that. I receive that.
whereas I don't know how many times I heard, oh, here come the Michael Waterworks. So I was never allowed to express how I was feeling on the inside.
And I feel like that sometimes when I'm repeating myself over and over again. But then I have to remind my partner, if I'm repeating myself, it's because things aren't changing. So it goes both ways. Like,
Yeah.
it always, I feel like it doesn't always go both ways, but it often there's a give and a take. That's what relationships are. They're compromise at the end of the day, I would say.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty lucky because like I said earlier, and we've really grown together and apart and together again. I feel like the crux of our problems now are like really kind of trite compared to, is trite the right word? Compared to like what we used to deal with. Like really big insecurity, not really knowing how to love yourself, which makes it hard to love your partner. That was my problem mainly when I was younger. But now our problems are mainly like, oh, you went and hooked up with somebody and you didn't like text me before. That was annoying. Like it's like stuff that's really not as big a deal as far
like,
as I feel.
Even polyamorous and open relationships need boundaries.
Totally, and that's totally
And
fair.
they need to be mutually established and agreed upon.
Yes, call it push past your limits is kind of the phrase we're using. It's like push past your limits. Because if you wall yourself in and you sort of...
When you say we, sorry.
My partner, and my boyfriend. Sorry, yes. For my relationship poly trio, we like to say push past your limits or push past your boundaries, one of the two. Because I think it's so easy to box yourself in and say, this is who I am and this is... and I'm set in my ways. And it's like, why? Why be set in your ways? Kind of that challenge. It's like of self-expression, self-exploration. I would have never gone to a fetish bar 10 years ago wearing a jockstrap on underwear night and only a jockstrap walking around. I never would have done that. Like, absolutely. Now I do it, and I literally called my mom the next day and I was like, I went to a fetish bar and I wore a jockstrap yesterday. And she was like, what? That's cool. Like, she thought it was awesome.
That's great.
I was kind of scared to tell my dad, but I told him and he was like, dude, he like gave me a high five. I'm like, that was not expected. But it's like...
It's not the relationship I have with my parents.
It's... My family's very strange, in the best of ways. And I'm very lucky and I'm very grateful to them.
However, I think it's fantastic to push your boundaries and explore the way you are in the world. But I do think it's also important to know when you have hit your actual boundary.
100%.
And I mean, not knowing your dynamic, your relationship dynamic, I just hope that none of the people involved feel the pressure to push beyond if they don't want to.
100%. That's part of the agreement. It's an encouragement, not a requirement. It's all about just being comfortable in what you are and who you are. And it can be in all facets. It can be, sexuality. It can be romantically, intimately. We're trying to do new things beyond just going to the bar, right? It's like we're just evolving. It's just another way to say, try to evolve. It's okay to evolve.
Yeah.
There's no sense staying stagnant if you don't want to.
He's such a special human being. Like, it was very early in the piece for us to experience someone who saw what we were doing and went, I'm on board and I will do whatever it takes to facilitate this. I think I said it on one of the tour episodes, there was the slightest whisper that I could make it to a tattoo appointment before the show. And he was like, I'll drive you. And it was a 45-minute drive. Like, it was no small feat. And he spent the whole, we talked in and the drive ended up being far longer than 45 minutes because we kept getting distracted, and sat with me and held my hand through my tattoo and heard my story and shared his stories and what he was going through. And some of it you'll have just heard. And has, since offered the world to us to make this easy. And that's been really powerful. There are a lot of people who love what we're doing and kind of just are keen to casually observe, and that's totally cool and that's amazing in itself. But for someone who's like, no, what can I offer and what can I, how can I be involved? We just, there's another lifelong thing.
Yeah.
Is our friendship with Kenny.
Yeah, Kenny's such a gem.
So we set out on a sort of fairy tale with a whole bunch of great visions for what we were about to encounter.
And then I got cut at the quick. No, what's the...
You've
nipped in the bud?
Nipped in the bud, cut at the quick, yeah, coming to the quick, yeah.
And so...
Cut off at the knees.
While I was trapped inside a hotel room, what did
we do? Well,
what did you and
I want to talk about this in particular because to set the scene, we had gotten to Palm Springs. We thought it was real nice, but it was also ridiculously expensive, and it just wasn't. It wasn't really our speed, and we were really looking forward to getting out. And we had gone to the Joshua Tree pub the night before and had some beautiful reflections. You'd listened to a sort of fairy tale again and had another kind of similar experience. I'm so glad you had that at the very least.
Yeah.
When we went out to the Arch Rock, but we'd gone to bed quite, raring to go. This was the real deal now. We were really, no more tour and no more kind of, fun hanging around in the city. It was like, this is where we really kind of put the extra wheels on and let's rumble.
In the morning I wake up and I'm like, good morning. And Bailey says, morning, honey. And I'm like, I have COVID.
And what kind of kicked off was the rock bottom of the trip, having to sort of haul ourselves out of bed, throw masks on, shovel our shit in a bag and leave Michael behind because, as much as we'd sort of, tried to plan for this prospect and as much as we'd sort of had it in mind, we didn't really know what we were going to do if it happened, and suddenly we were faced with that. And the most logical explanation was, we have to still get the car to the next location. We've still got a trip to service here, and we still have things to gain from these places that now we kind of have to do them by correspondence with, we're doing Michael's Walk without Michael, and it left us all in a very interesting state of heartbreak, but kind of having to rush out of there and barely say goodbye, knowing that we couldn't really hug or anything. It was rough. So Teague and I haven't spent, swathes of time together, and we've certainly never spent any time together without Michael, so suddenly our relationship had to really level up, and we had to be really open with each other, which wound up being a really special component of this trip, and I will treasure it as hard as it was for that, because it meant that I feel like me and Teague are far more deeply connected now than we ever were, and I'll always be grateful for that. But the day that we departed, we headed back to Joshua Tree to check out a few more spots, which kind of all went by in a bit of a very bizarre blur because we were just kind of reeling from what had happened and how we were going to handle the next bit. Because at the same time, all the bookings were in Michael's name, and so bless you for having kind of turned around while you were sick and start rebooking and reorganizing a whole trip for people when you weren't even going to be there.
I redubbed myself Center of Command in Facepalm
Yeah, and for us it was really hard because we knew that you were struggling and we knew that it would be painful for you, but we were also on the road and we couldn't really stop. We had to get to Arizona. We were staying in Ash Fork, which is just into the border. We went through Grand Canyon and saw some incredible sights. And we were also trying really hard to still enjoy things and trying to make the best of it and trying not to let what had happened kind of get to us, which just left everyone in a bit of an awkward. It was uncomfortable to say the least, but we did our best to try and just make it as serendipitous as anything else. This is the way that things turned out, and we can still get something out of this.
And I was equal parts saying, please send me as many photos of your experiences as you can, while simultaneously resenting every single one with my epic amounts of FOMO.
Yeah, of course.
So it was...
And we were really scared that it was going to create a schism in all of our relationships, you know, because it was just uncharted territory for all of us in that sense. You know, it was... But we made it through, and it was just another one of those things where it's like, this trip isn't going to be all, you know, kumbaya. This is going to be hard, and it's going to...
We can break the silver lining.
We can. So Grand Canyon was really powerful for a view, but me and Teague both hit a very similar wavelength where, because of what we were dealing with, we weren't really very we weren't feeling the people. So Grand Canyon was often very, you know, there was a fair few people around, so we kind of just did some of the other little stops and took a few pics and just got to know each other really, which made it was, you know, a lot of those, you know, the things you said that day and all the conversations that we had. And then we hit a sign as we were leaving Joshua Tree that said, I'm getting my days confused, Grand Canyon wasn't till the next day, this is all a bit of a blur. We did Joshua Tree and then we had to get to Ash Fork that day, but it was quite a long drive. And we left Joshua Tree and there was a sign that said no services for 100 miles. And we literally drove through arid nothingness and yet somehow everythingness at the same time. Like, it was so arid and so raw, the landscape. And it was one of the hardest drives I've ever done because I'd also hauled myself out of bed, so I wasn't really awake. And it was hot and you know, the heat waves off the road, and we ended up driving past this memorial for Laura, who was a young woman who died as a passenger in a car accident 40 years prior, and people still go there and hang shoes up because they were her favourite thing, and we were just, it was desolate and devastating. And by the time we got to Ash Fork, which is a very, very small town, that there's not even a restaurant, there's a Family Dollar, which is like a sort of grim grocery kind of situation.
Do you know why I chose it? Simply because it's on Tori's map. Not many towns, on the Scarlet map, there are not many places mentioned, and so it seems to me that the ones that are somewhat significant to Scarlet's Walk.
I thought we'd just thrown a pin in going, oh, it's like...
We had. Like, it was a suitable distance for driving to break up the day. It was close enough to the Grand Canyon to go from there to the Grand Canyon. But it was also, it's shown on Scarlet's map.
Right.
That's why I chose it.
Yeah. Because
otherwise, like, when you look at Google Maps, you could choose anything.
Yeah, look, I know we would have gotten laid more if we'd stayed in Flagstaff, but you know, never mind. No, but like, well, also wasn't our objective, but like, Ash Fork was, the hotel was grimy and there were crickets and we had to put the microwave on the floor to like heat up our dinner, and it was a real fall from grace. It was a real kind of rock bottom kind of day. So when we got up and went to the Grand Canyon the next day, that was where we sort of really started to see our spirits lift and kind of move forward. And we ended up sort of changing things around because of the way accommodation bookings worked. We decided we would drive all the way to Albuquerque to stay with friends of Michael's parents. But on the way there, we stopped by the Painted Desert and spiritually got lost for hours. It was the most, I've never seen anything like it. You know, these beautiful pink rocks and these stretches of desert, and there's a place called Crystal Forest where agate has grown inside, like agate crystal has grown inside logs that would have stood like the Amazon did thousands of years ago, but that forest is now dried up because it moved into the Northern American continent when, you know, back when all the tectonic plates were moving. And the whole thing is this graveyard of fallen tree stumps that still like are sort of preserved in a way, but they're they're crystalline. It's one of the most tragically beautiful things I've ever seen. And we just were both kind of really enamored by what we were seeing. And it kind of, the way it fed into that song was a lot of that sort of, a sort of Fairytale is a driving song. It's a song about a drive. It's a song about trekking with someone, and not really having the relationship you thought you had. It very much fed into that. Like, that was our way of non-verbally getting to know one another for me and Teague. And by the time we got to Albuquerque and we're suddenly confronted with this, like, these people run a very successful Christian mission that's international. They are living in a very wealthy area in a very beautiful home. We suddenly went from one night in this grimy, dingy room to like separate rooms in a 5-room palace. It was astounding. It was an astounding sort of polar opposite way. And we were recommended by them to go to Santa Fe, which is like an artistic community, and we both fell in love with it. All the buildings are adobe buildings. Like, it all looks like it's from another time. Even the airport was done in adobe, and it was more like someone's front room than an airport. But we walked along Canyon Road and visited the Cathedral of St. Francis. And the art there was so inspiring, and the personalities we got to encounter. I think, I will finish soon, I promise. I'm trying to summarize as much as I can, but what I wanted to say in particular about this was, when we got to Santa Fe, I think both me and Teague felt like we'd been in such a hurry, and there was so much kind of going on. There was no time to process, and there was no time to really connect to where we were going. We were kind of just flying along freeways and kind of going, where are we now? Let's get a food and let's, But Santa Fe was kind of the first time we felt like we could take a breath and go, oh, this is what the place is about. And this is who the people are. And this is what's going on kind of culturally before. And we'll talk about the political, historic events that kind of cracked open a few days later. But that's what Santa Fe was great fun, because it just made us feel more connected to where we were staying and what we were doing.
Well, on that, I was stuck in a hotel room in Palm Springs. We all know this by now. I don't know how many times I've said it. But I used that time to sort of reflect in the way that I could. A friend of ours, Alexis, who's an incredible photographer, suggested watching a documentary called Desert Migration, which is about the generation of men who are living with HIV and the way they migrated to Palm Springs, because environmentally it's much more welcoming for their condition. Community-wise, they had each other. Just the home and the sense of belonging they found in the desert. There was less stigma, less judgment when they removed themselves from the larger population of Los Angeles or San Francisco, for example. And it talked about all of these different men's experience in how they live now compared to how they did, and it's very much about age and aging and like the weight that having HIV adds to that process. And they all have very different experiences too. Like, some are quite optimistic about life and how things have turned out, and others are struggling more with it. They're surviving, and they're glad they live in Palm Springs, but at the same time they do struggle to see the future for themselves still. And so it was really interesting the way that here I was stuck in a room, but I was still learning this cultural history that's relevant to us as queer people.
Absolutely.
And like that sort of moment in history. And then it tied in with our experience of San Francisco and visiting the Castro and getting in touch with that history there in a way. Bailey had a wonderful experience. So this came about because Teague witnessed something as Bailey and I were in a shop. We came out and
We were at dinner.
Oh, we were at dinner?
Yeah, we were at dinner, but we didn't see it. I
And
think they passed. Yeah, Teague was faced the other way or something.
and then Teague was just like, "Oh, two guys just walked down the street in the nude," like, and that got us to googling like the laws around public nudity in San Francisco, and like here we were in the heart of the gayest,
place on
in the
earth.
gayest heart of the gayest city in America, at least, and we're learning about the history of public nudity.
Yeah, and the restrictions on our community in particular. You know, very much the no kink at Pride kind of, you know, debate and how that's kind of informed places like the Castro, which was like the nexus of HIV and you know, and activism around AIDS. We found out that while San Francisco has long been known for a place that hasn't criminalized public nudity, it has recently. Genital nudity in particular, so frontal nudity is no longer allowed on the Castro. And hearing that, I felt really emboldened and felt really angry that, you know, we were still having these kinds of... It was just ridiculous to me that, you know, there was nowhere in the world where people could just be free, and, you know, and why this sort of sanitization of the public domain was just suddenly seemed very ridiculous on a street in particular where there is so much homelessness and drug affection, and I'm like, those are real things that require support. We don't need to be policing our community in this way. And we joked, it was like, oh, you know, for first offenders it was like $150 fine, and I was like, fuck it, I'll pay that. And so we ended up going, some of us went shopping. One of us spent a great deal of coin on very valuable pieces of clothing. I'm very glad that you bought all these, because I've loved every inch of fabric I've seen on you since then. But we crossed over to the Castro side, and I thought, fuck it. You know, it's not... I think it's quite a common thing for the cis white gay male body to be kind of accepted for its sexuality and accepted for its exhibition. I wanted my trans femme body out on that damn street, and so yeah, we kind of found a little cozy corner. I stripped my clothes off, and we did a bit of a photo shoot outside the Castro Theatre, and then I realised I'd left my socks on, so we did another one. And, you know, no one batted an eye. There weren't any remarks. There were still people around, and it felt so amazing. And I think it was later that day that we ended up going up to visit the giant pink triangle that had been constructed that is visible from space. That was a really fucking humbling thing, to kind of be sat in a place where our blood has been spilled and our voices were silenced, and, you know, people were outed and people lost their jobs, people lost their homes, and, you know, going from a street where that's the history, and where Harvey Milk, you know, campaigned, we're the first, you know, sort of openly gay person in American politics who was killed, you know, to now we've got these sort of, some would argue, tokenistic grand gestures of acceptance. It was all very, very powerful.
I mean, maybe tokenistic on the side of the city. The people that organised the triangle, it's very much a passion for them.
Yeah, for sure.
And powerful voice, way to speak. Yeah, you wonder how many people drive past that pink triangle and even know what it represents.
Which, for those of you who don't know what a pink triangle represents, it was the symbol given to gay men in Nazi prisoner of war camps to identify them, which often made them very subject to all kinds of horrendous violences. And it was after World War II, it was kind of adopted as a symbol of power and of recognition, and it was reclaimed.
Yeah.
So that, you know, and it's absolutely worth reading up on the history of the pink triangle, and also the lavender triangle, or the purple one that was, I believe it's a triangle, which was used to markate lesbian women.
So, learning from all of this history,
And
what
all of this.
advice do you have for Virginia on this episode?
So thinking about a sort of, coming back very specifically to a sort of fairy tale, the advice I had is that not every moment in your relationship needs to fit into a narrative, needs to be a fairy tale. And lately, you know, as a result of the relationship that I'm no longer in, something that I look back on in my behavior and go, wow, I wish I'd done that differently, was I did a lot of writing through that time because it was my first love. You know, it was the first time I'd really fallen in love, and I wanted to kind of process and analyze it. And what I was doing was kind of Carrie Bradshawing my relationship, like looking at every interaction, how it fit into an idea about how the relationship was or wasn't progressing. I was doing that over being present in the moments and just enjoying them for what they were. And, you know, it was like every time he'd walk out the door, I would start to go, what did I do and what could have happened and why didn't that go the way that I wanted? And, you know, did I fuck up or, you know, whatever? And it was like, you could have just let it be what it was and just enjoyed it and been happy. And I discourage people now from thinking too hard about what they're feeling. And this is the Aquarian condition. We're always thinking about our feelings more than we're feeling them. But I really know that when I go into my next relationship, I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to sort of see it as a fairy tale, because there's a reason why fairy tales begin and end when they do, because they're not meant to describe the full breadth of a relationship and the full diversity of a queer relationship as well. You know, so few fairy tales, and this is why someone is writing a very cool or editing a very cool anthology that you want to stay tuned about.
So my advice from a sort of fairy tale is that if you're sad, like if you're so sad that you want to put the book down, or you don't want to put the book down because it's better than reality, ask yourself why. Like, really question what could be making you sad. And further to that, if you have to steal the truth from the person you're with, if you're literally breaking into their phone to check up on them or read just so that you know where you stand, if you can't find out where you stand with them from them directly, you literally don't know where you stand, and you need to sort of question how healthy that is.
A relationship should never compromise your morals or your ethic. If you're breaching someone else's boundaries in order to affirm your own
or feel safe,
then the relationship is not a safe space for you, and you need to not be in it, even if it's just for a period of time until you reconfigure those boundaries, so that you're not having to, you know, betray someone else's trust or privacy in order to get what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about this song, and during our conversation to plan the episode, I really was struck with another song by Anne Brun, who is another one of my obsessions. Yeah, thinking about this song really linked to a song by Anne Brun, Don't Leave, which really was powerful for me during the relationship, because the lyrics are, don't ever leave, that's what you asked of me. Do you know what it means when you plead? Don't you ever leave, that's what you said to me. Do you know what that can do to someone like me? It won't do us no good. I have no plans to be anywhere else but here, or to become someone that leaves. I didn't know there was an exit here. Darling, don't you try to capture me. Because the amount of times that my ex said to me, you can't leave me, like, don't ever leave me, I don't know what I'd do without you, you're my last person. Like, after, if we were to end, there would be no one else for me. These things on the surface sound romantic, but really they're nothing but controlling and manipulative, because if a relationship is good, no one's looking to leave. You don't need to state that. It's only when things are not going well that someone says don't leave.
Or it's when they know that there's a reason why you would leave that they know is about to come out.
Yeah. So consider that my gift to you all as a song swap as part of this episode, but go and listen to Don't Leave by Amber. It's beautiful.
If I may, I'll
Yes,
provide one
please.
as well. The song that really connects this one for me is a song called We Had Everything by Broods, and I've used it. I've listened to it in connection to various people in my life before, but the lyrics that I love that kind of a sort of Fairytale-esque are in the verse. They sing, "Every time I tell my story, I begin with you," and it seems very optimistic, and then it sort of gets to the chorus, and it's, you know, we were young, we were proud, we were promising, we were caught in the heat of it, we were young, we had love, we had everything, and you realise that it's over, you know, and that it got kind of burned up in its own optimism. It got burned up in its own idea of itself without actually forming roots and having truth and being based in something real and stable. Yeah, have a listen to that and see what you think.
But that winds up our sort of fairy tale episode. 2 down.
We managed to get through it without bawling our eyes out, so I'm pretty impressed actually.
We did that in pre.
Yeah, we're in the planning.
And we'll edit it out in post.
What's next?
Next, we will be talking about Another Girl's Paradise as we journeyed through what certainly wasn't my paradise, Orlando Disney World.
I was the another girl in this situation.
Yes.
It was my paradise.
So look forward to that episode. We'll try and get it out to you as soon as we can and not get too far behind on all of these girls we're visiting.
Absolutely. And as always, remember that you can jump on the GoFundMe and support us with content creation and with fuel and food and getting through this epic journey. We're in week 3 now. We're about to hit week 4. Oh no, it's week 4 starting today. So it's Tuesday.
Oh yeah.
So we're in our 4th week now, and we've got another 4 to
Weeks to go.
So we've got a long road ahead of us, and all of this sport means everything.
We're at the beginning of. We have 5 weeks.
We have 5 weeks, yeah. And jump onto michaelerp.net as always for all of your updates and all the links and all the bits and pieces, and find us on social media.
Find everything michaelerp.net.
Big love. See you next time.
The Michael's Walk podcast acknowledges that the journey they are undertaking takes place on the sacred and unceded nations of many proud Indigenous peoples. From the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, we are fortunate to call home, to each and every Native American tribe's land we'll set foot on as we travel. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and humbly acknowledge their sovereignty.